worked with Tim at one point. So I've been with traditional agencies, started getting into the tech about 8 years ago when I jumped over to VoApps, did digital collections, and I'm really excited for this conversation because I have it pretty much almost every day in my life. So I'm a little biased. I'll put that out front because EXL has some very cool AI built that you can use today. But I think it is worth talking about and just educating the industry on, what to look for. If you're going to build it, let's be smart about it and know what you're getting into.
Fair. And so as we think about, really what this all means, what do organizations underestimate the most when they think about building something internally? Because LLMs are not an inexpensive thing to build. And we're going to either have to leverage some third party technology in order to execute on it, right? Like there's going to have to be some other LLMs that we're bringing in and we're kind of piecing together or cobbling our own solution. But like, what's that biggest thing that organizations are not understanding or not preparing for when they think about building technology or AI technology themselves?
I'll go first, Tim, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
So
like,
I would
just
say,
jump right into it, guys. I mean, we all
all right,
present all the time. I
I'll
figured
be
I'd just
timid.
throw out
So I would
questions and
say
see where they
it's
go.
I say it's the maintenance, right? Like people
Okay.
look at it as I'm going to build this technology and I'm going to have this technology now in my, it's going to be one of the tools I use to collect. I would say, hey, if you're going to build customer facing AI, like either a virtual agent or two-way SMS, you're going to have to maintain, adjust that technology constantly.
Mhm.
Plus, I think there are roles you will need to hire or outsource via contractor that you will need to maintain that technology, especially as the technology evolves, as laws change in Minnesota, states, cities, you name it. There's a lot more than just building it and let's go and now we don't have to pay for it anymore. I think there are costs to maintaining AI that a lot of people don't consider.
And I think, Mike, you make some really good points. I would add on that what's really concerning to me, if you're going to build something, you're going to build it with today's tech, right? So you
Mhm.
say, so I went back and I was looking at one of my old GPTs that I had built, and
Mhm.
it's built on 4.0, which is a great LLM. Don't get me wrong, but we're on 5.2 now, and it doesn't update automatic. And
Interesting.
when I did upgrade it to 5.2, the results were not what I was expecting because it was built and I made the instructions for that GPT using 4.0, and then I tested it and
Mhm.
all that other stuff. So to your point, you're absolutely right that you're just not going to be able to maintain it. It's not going to be like a legacy system that you build and it just, and it's good for, 20 plus years or whatever. It's going to be something that's going to be changing so rapidly because the underlying LLM technology, like Adam mentioned, that's required for these is going to change so rapidly. It is. I mean, it's an AI arms race as it relates, between Google, Claude, OpenAI, DeepSeek, and other
Mhm.
players that are out there. Your Jen Sparks, Manus, all these guys. And so, if you're going to build it yourself, it's the maintenance of it, and then also the realization of whatever that initial, foundation you built on that LLM is going to change, and that's going to impact, and you're going to want it to change to be able to get it better. So, if you built this to be competitive, you want it to be competitive, and you're going to have those that piece along with it. So you have to be able to balance that in there, like you
That's a
mentioned.
really that's a really good point, Tim. Too. Like I always tell people, think of it like this. I've been with EXL for about 2 years and like 4 months. I'm on my second total virtual bot. Like it's already the one is out. We don't even. I mean,
Mhm.
people use it, but and people like it and it produces, but the technology has already advanced beyond that 2 years ago, right? Like, and it's
Right.
completely different. The new tech, the agentic AI virtual agents. If you have not heard them, it's amazingly human-like And so think about what you're going to build. What is it? Be honest with yourself, because everybody, there's a lot of terms that there's no standard of what people use to describe a virtual agent or a term. I would call, what you see mostly in the market is what I would call intent-driven AI, and now that agentic is here and starting the process of getting utilized by agencies, creditors. I think a lot of creditors have said, yeah, this is a step above. Even creditors who have money, have resources to invest, have said, we're not a tech company. This is beyond us because it changes monthly,
That is a really
faster than.
interesting statement, Mike, because that's what I saw in the TransUnion survey data that, believe it or not, creditors are the least likely to try and develop something in house, and debt buyers were the most likely to try to develop something in house. And I think the debt buyers look at it as a potential competitive advantage. And I think the creditors realize we're not a tech company, we are a creditor, and we need to focus on lending money, which I think is smart. I think that seems to be the right path for those types of organizations. But as Tim talked about, kind of the arms race, we start thinking about Gemini releases. So ChatGPT bumped up their release dates, and like you see this
Yes.
back and forth for market share right now. And I think as we're in this AI arms race, it's just going to move faster and faster and faster, at least in the short term. So what hill are you willing to die on? Like, where are you willing to stake
Hmm.
your flag? What hill are you willing to die on? Because if you're going to build something in house, you're going to have to stake that flag, and you're going to have to defend that position for an extended period of time, because you're not going to. It might be easier to move from, let's say, a baseline of ChatGPT 4 to 5.2, but it's going to be very difficult to move from ChatGPT 4 to Gemini 3 to back to ChatGPT 5.2. What's that going to look like if you don't have the resources? Now, my next question comes into the resources themselves. I know we read the headlines. Meta is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a specific developer to be able to bring them in from an AI perspective. So, can these smaller companies even afford to be competitive in attracting and retaining that type of AI talent, and compared to a multi-billion-dollar organization that is right, like built for this?
Ooh, that's. I mean, you need a lot. You'd have to allot a
It's
lot
a
of
lot of
money for
money.
this product,
It's a
right?
lot
Right.
of money,
I,
right?
it's a lot of money. Like, so we're a global company. That is a resource we constantly are trying to hire, right? And so we're hiring around the world for that talent, not just here. In the U.S., I think it's even more competitive for that talent. So you could, I mean, I think you can. You just have to commit to it. Um, but again, I think your flag point is very key, Adam. Like, this is what you're going to be marketing. This is what you're going to be standing next to. This is what you're going to be saying. This is our tech, and this is what we do on every RFP you fill out. So, um, is it going to last? That's the number one concern I have when I hear it. And I think that's what the creditors said. Like, the creditors saw the change. They were all building. When I got to EXL August of
Yeah.
2 years ago, that was my number one competitor was we're building internally, and that has flipped.
Right.
Because what they built is the old, like Tim said, is what you're building is today's technology. Today's technology is outdated in 3 months.
Today.
Yesterday. Yeah, it was updated yesterday.
It's
Yeah.
insane. I I do think there's another point here though, is that Mike, if you can get the talent, that's great. You got to be able to hold on to them, which is going to be even
Yeah.
harder because everybody wants that space, and being a global player helps because you can go into other markets to be able to find that talent. I do think also that there's this misconception today because some people are using ChatGPT, so they're like, hey, look at I am, and it's easy for me to use, and I'm a really good prompter. I'm just going to go build it myself, right? Because they can't get that talent. And there's some tools. There's tools that are out there. People see them. It's like the either vibe coding, or you could use a GPT with Claudex, and it could code for you, and then nobody knows what to do with the code, but they've coded. Um, you've got all these other tools that are out there, but you could use something like a Lovable or I'm playing around with Gumloop right now, and it's, it has the capability to build. Would I turn that on? No, no, because I don't have all the back end stuff. I don't have the security stuff, but I am playing with it to see what it could possibly do to help me when I'm, reaching out to like a company like yours, Mike, to be able to say, okay, this is what I wanted to do, and have these capabilities. So at least I have an understanding of what these tools can do. But that, I could just go build it myself. I'm just going to go, and I love when people tell me this, I'm going to build my own voice AI. It's my favorite one right now. It always makes me chuckle. I'm just like, yeah, go for it. Let me know
Half of the companies that told me at ACA in July that they were building an AI voice bot are now doing something very different. Like, but I mean, even we went from ACA, by the time I met with some of the same people at the RMAI summit or at DCS just a couple of months later, they pivoted their whole organization. But that's again why I'm not betting on some of these smaller companies. And, look, if you were a local restaurant and you were selling acai on the street or something, and you want to build your own app to be able to like do some minor things, inventory management, whatever, like that's great. Go use a Lovable, like go use Claude, build yourself a tool. But that's not a financial services level product that you're going to build with that tool set. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, and as you get more and more exposed to consumers, so you're right, a little vendor on the side, build it up in Artifacts and Claude, and away you go, and you got, an app, within minutes. But if you're sending out content to consumers and they're responding to it, in a highly regulated financial services, I mean, the risk there is massive because AI is at scale. It can, if it goes off the rails, which is one of the big arguments, it can go off the rails big time. It's like when we saw that, I think it was the Air Canada case, right? Where Air Canada had a bot and it was giving all these deals and stuff. And the courts came back and said, your bot did it. You got to own it. There's like $20 million. So
yeah, you own the output.
Those risks when you're building your stuff.
Yeah, and I think, Tim, even taking that a step farther is like, okay, so you're going to answer the RFP to a creditor if you're an agency, let's say. And what are the questions are, who built it? What did you use? Like, do you own the LLM? Did you use ChatGPT? That's not what they want to read, right? Like, they don't want that information. Like, so if I would say if you built it, I think you have to take some sort of open source and make it your own, right? Like, and hunker that down so it cannot access the internet. So there's a lot of steps where even if you built a great using anything out there, right? Like, is it secure? Like you said earlier, Tim, I don't, that's above my pay grade, but I would be leery. Is it going to pass the smell test for an RFP? If you're pulling all these different pieces together to make an AI product, and you own like one of the 10 pieces, is it your product anyway?
What does the product privacy assessment look like? Like what is the final privacy impact assessment going to look like for the organization if you are stacking other things on top of each other? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, what is the model evaluation, the prompt engineering training document? Who do you have to go get to fill that out for you? Like, make sure, because you can build whatever you want, but it's got to pass accreditors or regulators. Think of those two terms. Sniff test to make sure that everything that you say is there. There are no biases built in. There's so many things. Like, think of a birth date. Are you taking that information and all of a sudden you have an ageism lawsuit? Like, because 0.5% of your settlements are higher on elderly people than. So I just think there's a lot to consider. I would also say if you're going to build it, you need great tech people, but you need collection people who understand this domain, like this industry, to be there with them every step of the way. Because if they're not, if collection people are not helping to build this, you're building a customer service AI that may have issues when it gets specifically into this space.
So one of the things that we've talked about in the past, Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just gonna say, what we're gonna see from a regulatory perspective that Mike was talking about, and that level of transparency, you know, the, we saw the executive order come out from the White House about states not creating, roadblocks to AI. Let's just say that that's not effective or as effective as people think it's going to be. The states have already come out with AI regulations. We're going to see this patchwork, and you're going to have to make sure that it's compliant in Massachusetts, California, Colorado, Utah, Texas, just as kind of you do. We've been lucky with privacy. Privacy's kind of followed what we saw in California, which is a GDPR light, as I call it. What we saw come out of Europe, you have the right to know what's being collected. You have the right to delete those kind of things. But I'm afraid with AI because it's moving so quickly, right? People don't clearly understand it. You have statutes like California that have AI defined in an overly broad fashion, that it could include basic scripting, if you will, things that we've been doing since the beginning of programming, not necessarily generative. So you're going to have that level of expertise for anything that you're going to be presenting. But and I think that's coming. And I think that's going to add a significant burden. Yeah, you could build something today. Let's say you can get past all those other hurdles, but now you've got this regulatory compliance, risk assessments, NIST or the ISO 42001 standard, all of those other kind of things. Now you're going to have to have that stuff, and you're going to have to probably have a bigger organization. But Adam, I apologize that I cut you off.
No, that's me, because I'm on the other side of the world, right? Like, broadcasting from Brazil has its challenges. So I appreciate you
It's
guys.
lovely weather, though.
No,
Lovely weather.
it is lovely weather. So Tim,
Probably
when
a
you were
little
talking
warmer.
about it is a little bit warmer here than probably where most of you are right now. I think it's like 80 degrees Fahrenheit here right now, and I have to say Fahrenheit because everybody gets confused. So, one of the things that you were talking about was, Trump comes out with this executive order. We're gonna do preemption at a federal level, but I don't see any of that becoming a reality unless Congress steps in and does something. And they haven't done anything about privacy. So I don't know what makes us think that they're finally going to get their act together and try and put together, whether it be a regulatory body or something that allows us.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll get extra lucky, and like, let's just hope for, an early Christmas present here, to where maybe we can wrap privacy and AI into one organization and
Wow.
have it not have an omnipotent director that sits over it, that becomes a political punching bag no matter who's in office. But I don't think that's realistic. So I want to turn the conversation here for a minute to the data that feeds the tools. And so, Mike, you and I have talked about this a couple of times. Tim, you and I have talked about this on AI Hub. Is, the AI and the tool sets that we're using are only as good as the data that we're going to provide. And Mike, I know one of the things that you've told me that you guys provide before is assistance in, actually, I don't need all of your data, and I can help you organize and structure the data that I do need to see. Now, if I'm going to build something internally, now I have to build it and I have to structure all the data. Like, how realistic is that? And is that amplifying the amount of resources necessary for me to build a tool in house?
I think it is and it isn't, though, right? Like, I'll try to not be too biased, but I think, I've seen so many different collection systems. We have a lot of data, right? We gain data. I think we don't utilize it effectively. Like, we have all these interactions with customers, and I'm not sure we're using that to its fullest, but it depends. I think the challenge is you're pulling data from different spots: your dialer, your email server, your CRM. How is it feeding in the CRM? Can you access what you need to create, let's say, a two-way AI, which can communicate with the customer in real time? That may be a challenge. I do see. So then, are you going to create a data lake, have all this information feed to that system? You got to make sure that system's secure. You got to firewall the heck out of it, because that's going to have all the data. And then you need to be able to pull it as you need it, especially with a virtual agent. Like, a virtual agent is like this: a text, you get, you'll have a person can respond 6 hours later to her after you send it. But a virtual agent, I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but you have the data. Like, so many prospects tell me, I don't know if I have the data. If you're collecting accounts and you have all the regulatory information to collect an account, you have enough data to do it. It's just.
But if you
is it
don't know you
organized,
have the
structured, or
data, is it worth actually trying to build? Like, if you don't even know that you have the data, like, should you? Is it irresponsible to be trying to build your own tool set?
and maybe those are different voices in the organization saying there's no way. Why are we going to
It
do this?
could
Like
be.
I hear that a lot.
Right.
We think we can build it, but we'll never get it done, right? Like how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
I hear that all the time, right? Like I'm sure Tim, you've had these conversations where we should build it, and then the guy next to it goes, "We'll never get it done." Like who's going to make this their
Right.
full time job to be in charge of it? Who's going to
Exactly.
report to them? We have to hire people. Like where's the expertise coming from? It's a lot. Now, if you commit to it and this is the path you've chosen and you have the money, I know a guy who's using tech. He's built some of it. He's pieced it together, and they're very effective, right? Like we're good friends. We talk about it all the time. He calls me for hints, things like that. So it can be done, but it's just a long road. So timing is some consider with that, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we've talked about before, right? And I think back, Adam, to your question, if you don't think you have the data and you're going to try to go build something you don't think you have the data, then I put you in the batshit category, crazy category, because if you don't have the
That's
fundamental
it.
blocks to build what you need, right? So that's a legal term. You can look that up. But in all seriousness,
I'm gonna look that up, Jim.
that should be your first clue. We need to go get help. So if you're sitting around the table and a bunch of people are going, "Yeah, I don't even think we have that data," you're like, "Okay, thank you for playing. We're going to move on." But Mike's point's the one we've kind of talked about already. It's like so if you have the resources, great. That puts you in a great spot. If you can get the expertise using those resources, that's great. You've checked off that box. As we talk about that checklist. Do you have the commitment to do this, right? Which is, we're not just going to make this part of Mike's job. We've got to get somebody in here who's going to be doing this full time forever, for as long as we do it, because it's going to continue to change. And so I think it's easy for us to check some of those other boxes. Like, I don't have the resources. Perfect. Move on. I can't get the expertise. Okay, move on. I The commitment one's a little bit harder, because that can change if the CEO changes or ownership changes. That can change very, very quickly. And most people don't realize what that level of commitment really means. It means like dedicated, focused, willing to continue to spend, when, somebody might come in and say, "Hey, look, we need to get ready to sell. So we're going to stop all this other development and stop everything else." It's that lack of commitment. I think in our space, I think in any industry, really, to be honest with you, it's pretty easy to start. It's the execution and implementation to get it across the finish line, which is where we all struggle. Whether it's, January 1st, we've got our New Year's resolutions, great starters. The gym is packed that first week. Week 2, it's a little thinner. By week 3, it's like back to normal. The people
Yep,
that are
thank God.
committed, yeah, I know, yeah, who are committed, who are going to continue that piece, and that's just part of human nature. So you have to really dive deep into that element, and assuming you can get past those other ones, have the resources, expertise, that commitment is going to be crucial. And it's like looking at the team and saying, "Hey, you committed to do this." I'd almost have them sign something and have it notarized and hung up on a wall somewhere so everybody could look at it and say, "Nope, you said you were committed. We're going to have to do
It's not a
this."
terrible
Now,
idea.
I
No,
think Adam,
but
real quick, like based on those numbers you were reading, like how debt buyers are higher up on this, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of what they're building is models, right? Like now, if you wanted to
mm,
build models to evaluate portfolios, and I mean, probably the expertise, no one's more capable with that knowledge than because they've all been using models, right? They've just had humans running it. So now you add or you bring in a group to build you some machine learning and algorithms and AI to make these models better. That's where we started. We were EXL got into the AI business for collections through modeling for creditors and debt buyers, right? Like so, I think that's something that the industry can do. right? I think that's more achievable. Like, what do we always say on our demos is, let's start with the outcomes. What are you looking for? What do you want to accomplish? Because if you want to do everything in AI, it's very hard. You're going to need, right?
Right. Right.
But if you want to do something like that, and you're a debt buyer, and you want to evaluate, even a collection agency, if you want to create your own internal scoring using AI, I think that's achievable on your own. You with a minimal commitment. You still got to
I
have
think it's
someone
the
who
use
goes,
case that's most
that
likely
channel.
for us to be able
Yeah.
to develop internally, right? Like the debt buyers
Yeah,
are probably the most capable for it. But let's go back and look historically about how AI entered our marketplace to begin with. At first, the first companies that came out were scoring companies, basically, right? Attunely and other organizations that aren't in the industry
Mm.
any longer, right? But that's where it kind of all started was who is going to be able to build some tools that help us to prioritize accounts, score accounts, and model potential liquidation before purchase. So, Mike, I definitely hear the idea of the debt buyers building out their models and being able to better understand the investments in accounts, right? The scoring and segmentation, those kinds of things.
yeah.
Do you think that's the best use case in which debt collection companies can build something internally? Like we spent a lot of time about why they shouldn't, but once you get that data into Snowflake and we start thinking about where is it most realistic, guys, for the industry to actually build something on their own?
I think there, and I think there are a lot of administrative processes that are probably, I was listening to the NVIDIA CEO on Joe Rogan. It was really a good podcast. But he said if your job is the process, then your job may be in question in the next 5 years, right? Like, so if you're
Mm.
filing or just checking, I think there's administrative behind the scenes. It's not necessarily scoring, but just handling so much, busy work, those type of projects where it may not truly be AI, it could be machine learning. Like I look at it as like robotic processing with a little intelligence that says, "Hey, a human should look at this. A human should look at that," or because this letter is not just a cease and desist, but there's a threat in here of a lawsuit. Stuff like I think there's opportunity there. Those processes that are highly manual, that's where I would look if I wanted to build something to give me an ROI quickly that is achievable to test the effort to build something like a complicated scoring model or something like that that is going to be one bad equation and a scoring model. It's also tough.
Oops. Oops.
But I would say
Yeah.
manual processes are behind the scenes are the place to start if you're going to build internal.
Yeah. And I agree with Mike. I think there's a whole host of things that you could do that, they're not consumer facing, they're internal. You still have to get past the security piece. So don't be using the free version of
Yes.
ChatGPT to clean up a data set for you. So you still have to get past that, some of those things. I do think, Adam, to come back to your point, especially as it relates to the debt buyers, if you will, yeah, they're very comfortable in building the models. We just have to be careful that model building is not, the same as using some of the advanced, AI tools that are out there, the generative AI. A lot of models are built on, around machine learning, which is a form of AI, and I think that's where this really helps. Is you can use machine learning. It's an algorithm. You can set it up. It runs. You don't really have to worry about it changing much. Rarely do the algorithms change, but they do change from time to time. So it's fairly stable. The generative AI stuff is what is changing dramatically. And I do think there's sometimes this fallacy to be able to say, well, you know, I built something using RPA. I should just be able to build something using AI and it should be easier, right? And it can be, don't get me wrong, but it can also open up all these other doors that we've necessarily talked about. I do think, to Mike's point, there's probably a bunch of stuff in the back office that is a great place to start. And I wouldn't even start with AI. I would start with what is the process And why do we do it that way? Really, you can love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. But Elon Musk has been so successful because he always starts with the process, right? And he removes everything that does not add value and is not required. He just removes it, right? And he sometimes removes stuff to a point where it breaks, and then he goes, okay, that's where it breaks. Now we have to put this back on so it doesn't break. So he has the bare minimum. If you started just looking at your processes first, and then you could say, okay, now what can I automate? Maybe you're using a Power BI tool or an RPA or something along those lines, or even some basic scripting could get you by. And then you could say, I'm now going to graduate to maybe, RPA or machine learning or whatever. And as you start to go and your level of expertise start to shrink, we should all be able to review our policies and procedures and figure out what we should be doing and not doing and asking those questions. Anybody can do that. Anybody who's watching this can do that. Using scripting, using RPA, using AI, that's different, and it goes up. The level of complexity goes up, and that's really where you need to bring that level of expertise that Mike's been talking about in. So I wouldn't, if you wanted to, you could take your current process, upload it to ChatGPT and say, what am I required to do here? What could I eliminate? That would actually streamline the process, and it would give you a pretty good start. Now, would you still want to be the human in the loop? Maybe want to verify that with compliance or outside counsel before you just go and implement. Yeah, we don't need to send a model validation notice. ChatGPT said it's fine. Just send them. Yeah, now that the CFPB is out of business, don't even need an MBN. Just go right forward, right? You're always going to want to be questioning stuff, but I think it's starting with those fundamentals. And to Mike's point, there is great places where you could use AI and some of the tools that are out there. Just understand as you add more and more PI into it, or you use more and more complex tools, those risks go up, and they go up not linearly, they go up exponentially. So the exposure for using generative AI to respond to consumers when it hasn't been trained, hasn't been built correctly, can really go off the rails very, very quickly.
I think you're 100% right. And the scalability of the AI operations, I think, is one of the scariest things that we have to consider, right? Because if it's good, like you said before, if it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong in grand style. There's going to be no, small mistake because everything is going to be exponentially amplified. But when we look at how organizations are looking at it, previously, and I was just actually going to pull some of the data so that we could talk about it in a little bit more of an interesting way, because what really interests me from a debt collection perspective is how debt collectors are looking at it from a use case perspective. And I think there's use cases like we've talked about that apply across any kind of an organization, right? Your local restaurant to, somebody selling pens. Like, it doesn't really matter. There's some use cases that I think are general and generic enough for everybody. And then on the flip side, we've got 6 use cases that are laser focused on the debt collection industry itself. For me, when I look at it, I see scoring and treatment, data sourcing and appending, chat and written communication, voice communication, quality and compliance, and negotiation. Right? Like, those are the 6 that I've identified that are really specific. And I think if you show me any vendor in the space, I can fit them into one of those categories, at least their products, pretty easily. But what I think is really, interesting here is how, when we look historically at the industry, right? The first people that came in were scoring and treatment. Then we started seeing this compliance use case start to come to the forefront, where it was, we'll identify what the, like Mike, you were talking about, we'll identify what who needs, which calls need to be seen by a live person, and we start looking at it from that perspective. Now we seem to have jumped over a lot of these other opportunities here, and we've gone straight to voice AI. And I don't know if that's because it's the sexy new thing that is now possible, but like, we've jumped over so much of the low hanging fruit to go after the thing with the biggest risk. Now, granted, bigger risk generally means bigger reward, but do you think that we've kind of skipped a few steps here and now we're focusing so far down the path? Or, is that really where the value is?
Well, I'm biased, so I'll just say that, right? Because I have a
I mean,
parenthood virtual
but you have
agent,
some
so
bias,
I'm just
but
going
you
to put it out.
also, but you built a lot of things to get there. You didn't just jump. You didn't go from here, let me listen to some compliance
Correct.
calls,
This
to
is,
now I'm
yeah.
making outbound calls.
I would. I think there's right? Like just the marketplace pressures, right? Of hiring
Mm.
agents,
Yep.
maintaining agents, training agents, rehiring, the extra volume that is out there, the high charge offs, the pressure from creditors who want to make their budgets too and have so much debt that I think there's a push to get, hey, if I can save money on the phones and if this can perform like a human, near a human, close enough, I can get to more of my volume and I'll figure out a way to get, right? Like there's so many. And, we just got a case study. Now it's not in the US, it's from Australia, and the numbers were really good. And I was shocked, but I think why people want it so bad is I think people are making decisions not to touch certain volume because it's either too small a balance, too risk, like it doesn't fit into the scoring models. My problem with scoring models is I could be a great customer, have a great job, be paying my bills, and then I am unemployed. And maybe I'm unemployed for 4 months now. And it's now savings is gone, unemployment, I can just feed my kids, and now I'm in real trouble. What good is the score that was 6 months, pulled 6 months ago off my credit bureau? So
Mhm.
I think there's all these pressures that um, I think that's why there's the push. Do I think it is voice is the best? I tell everybody to start with intelligent email slash two-way SMS, right? I think that is the
Mhm.
fastest, easiest. It's very secure. It is intent driven in AI, so you know what it's going to respond. It would pass Tim's check. That's how I look at it. And,
Yeah.
and and then you would. I think you'll see ROI, and then voice. Voice is the technology is getting better every day. Um, and I think let's say we did this time next year, I'm gonna have a lot more collection agencies, creditors on it, and like this came out, we went live in June with the newest technology, and
Mhm.
we did it at a big scale, but I don't have 50 references. Like you can't implement that many that fast. But I think it's there. I think people want it and they see those numbers. That the math is amazing, right? Like if you look at a price of a U.S. agent right party contact, it's $10. Um, pretty much. Near shore is probably seven ish. Offshore, let's say five, maybe three at the best. This is, less than half. This is pennies. So the math is so good. I think it's just so exciting. Um, but do your research. Make sure that you know collections are not. This a lot of this stuff started in marketing or payments, and now hey, collections is huge space. Let me bring it over. Be
Right.
careful. Be
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, to just add on to Mike's point, there is so much publicity around AI taking away jobs that's where people go and look and say, okay, if I were to take away jobs, which would they be? And it'd be like, well, if I could cut my payroll in half by adding AI, to Mike's point, that makes, my bottom line look so much better. But most of us are in competitive markets. You would have to still be competitive, right?
Yeah.
So you may lose some of that competitiveness because there was a study that was done not too long ago that said it's easier to break a promise to a bot than it is a human. And so I think some of that exists. I talked to Tim on Friday, and I promised I was going to pay, and now I'm paying. So you have to factor in all of those other things. But I think people look for those big wins right away. And if you could just make some process, 3 to 5% more efficient, and that frees up, and then you just do that again and again and again, and then year over year you get better and better, and you leave the voice AI stuff till it gets figured out and really processed right. I think that would be a great strategy for anybody. I will say this: voice AI does not fix the RPC problem. So
No.
because consumers don't look and go, hey, it's a bot that's calling me. I'm going to take this bot call. I'll be right back. No, they look and say it's a call. I don't recognize who it is. I'm not picking it up. Or I'm on an Apple phone. I'm going to have my bot answer that. right? So I don't know that number. It looks like spam. Perfect. I'm just gonna have the bot answer that for me. So
It's funny
it
you said
doesn't
that,
fix
Tim,
that problem. But what's that?
because it's funny you said that because in that case study, it was almost identical.
Hmm.
Right party
Hmm.
contact. It was like 3.6 versus 3.7. The bot was actually a tick lower, but it made 7 times as many calls, right? Like so. So
Right.
you're right.
Right. I make it up on volume.
Nobody
Yeah.
a call's an interruption. That's why I always tell people start with two-way SMS. It gets delivered. They can respond whenever they want. They can do it at
Yeah. Good. Good
at
call.
9
Or
p.m.
layer it in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking at
Layer in
their
your
phone.
SMS to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Layer in
Isn't
your
the
SMS to
RPC
say
going to
you
be
want to
driven
call
by
right
the
now.
data? Right, like more so than the tool or the outbound communication tool itself. It's going to be driven by the data that you feed it. So if you're going to send 7 times the volume of outbound calls on bad data, aren't you going to get pretty much the same result between a bot outbounding or whatever? I think there's other things that you could do to change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the tool that that I think is starting to come out is, hey, we have data to predict right party contact. But
Yeah. When?
me, as
Day. Time.
Mike Walsh, yeah, I think because of cell phone, I remember an agency I worked at, we did, and we were also a BPO. We did a massive study on every account internally, and we had some large accounts. There was huge volume, and we realized that what we thought was the hot times, like lunch and dinner, was not. And what
Right.
we found was almost every time during the day of operating hours was equally valuable for right party contact. So I don't believe there is any time. I think now that people have a phone in their pocket, it's do you come across a scam likely? Do they feel like answering it? Are they just bored in an airport? That's when I answer my, possible call and mess with the spammers. Um, what it I just don't I don't know. I think it's random based on okay, I got a call, I'm gonna answer, or I'm a person who always answers, or I'm a person who never answers. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what those tools are going to use. What a data set would it is it? Does your past predict the future? Maybe, but who like we used to call our friends on Friday after work and say, "Hey, how you doing? Where you going?" Nobody
Mm.
does that anymore. They text them. Like so, like you
Right.
used to order a pizza on your phone. Nobody does that anymore. Like I just don't know how you would, what data is out there to tell you you're going to get more right party. And I've talked to a couple of companies who say they have it, and I'm excited. I'm going to actually look at a couple in January, but they would
Yeah.
have to show me something. I just think it's random.
Yeah. But I think to your point though, Adam, I think if you said, hey, look, am I going to spend money on voice AI or should I spend money on better data? I would say spend money on better data so that you could, have the best phone number if you're going to call them or an email address so you can send them an email or an SMS where you know that they own the phone because that is safe for them maybe potentially launching voice AI at this time. So I think it is to your point, it's like you have the same number of dollars. Where do you want to be able to spend those and figuring that piece out? You still have to have AI. I think if anybody takes a message away from this webinar that we did, this is going to be the norm. How you use it's going to come down to your clients, your competitiveness, you know, all these things, your regulatory oversight, what states are you in, what states aren't you in, all those kind of things. And so look at all the opportunities. Just don't get tunnel vision and think it's got to be one thing and one thing only, voice AI.
So, Mike, we had a question come across in the comments. I don't know if you have an answer for this, but they were asking what's the pickup rate or the RPC in the US versus international clients? And do you see a big difference in how the US is answering the phone versus how it's being picked up in other countries?
It's a great question. I think different geographies definitely have different RPCs, right? Like, so we're in APAC. I mentioned Australia, UK. It's, but I would tell you that it's basically like, let's say it's 3.6 in Australia versus 3.7. it's always consistent in that geography, right? Like I the US, the data is probably very similar to what you're seeing. I don't think, like Tim said, no one's going to answer because it's it, a machine. What they might get, what the uptick might be for right parties is I got a text message, and my data is a little convoluted because it's a omni-channel solution, centralized, right? So I'm sending an email, a text, and I might generate a call from one of those to my machine. And people do prefer a lot of times to choose the machine over the human. They can always say human, right? But what we're seeing is, I always, think when Tim and I worked together, I always said, no one wants to talk to a stranger about how they can't pay their bills. Like, nobody wants to talk about how much they owe in student loan debt to people their friends, right? Like nobody that those conversations never happen. You never at a dinner party and you're like, hey, I gotta pay, the university this much money this month, or the government this. Like, it just doesn't happen. So I think that might go up in the future as people prefer to self-serve. Um, but I don't. That's something I'll look into, Adam, and follow, because I do wonder. Like I don't have all like I have specific clients in my head that I could tell you, but I need more than one client at a time. So that is a great question. Um, but I think it's probably consistent with what agency sees. It's the age of the paper, the data, the quality. We do a lot of like bucket one stuff. That answers a lot. But is that what the number you're looking at? Probably not, unless
Right.
you're a creditor. So, uh, but I can look at like fresh charge off and give you a number, and then you can kind of figure out from there. But I
We'll have to
think it's
put that
going
into
to.
one of the upcoming pieces, right? Because it feel like I definitely understand the point of like we need to look at the data specific to a particular subset and compare apples to apples and not apples to Mack trucks, right? Because they're just
Right.
not the same thing. But one of the things that as we kind of come into our final 10 minutes here, one of the things that I saw in the data this year was an increase in the percentage of organizations that said that their AI investment was exceeding their expectations. Right. I want to, and the numbers will come out at the RMAI conference when we release the final report, but we definitely saw an uptick in that. I guess my question to you is that do you think that that might be impacted by speed to market? Because if you're building something internally, which is a lower percentage of companies, you're going to have delay. It's not going to get out there as fast, and I'm sure that that's going to have an impact on whether or not you think this investment is meeting or exceeding your expectations. But do you think that the deployment timeline for an in-house solution versus an outsourced solution is playing a role in the level of financial satisfaction that organizations are seeing?
I think that makes sense to me, right? Like, so if I'm going to hire EXL to be my AI company, right? I can get that up and running in 2 months, right? So if I'm going to build my own, centralized virtual agent slash 2A SMS machine, I'm playing the long game. I don't want to pay a monthly per account fee to EXL, right? Like that's where I'm going to save down the road, and I think that's part of the strategy of why people do it that way. But the fact that they're happy with the results, um, like what happens with AI is it's very predictable. It doesn't, it shows up for work, it's on time, it says what it's supposed to say. So we, as like part of what we do is we map out, here's the lift you should get, right? Like here's the lift. So I'm not surprised by that number. As long as you have the right vendor for yourself, it fits what you're doing, it should be very predictable. Adam, I've always stolen your line about, if they're asking you for 70,000 hours of tapes, maybe you're building their product for them. But I don't know how that's legal, Tim, to share that. But as long as it's somebody who's done it before, and they should be able to predict a lift for you depending on what you're on. Is it old? Is it fresh? Is it tersh? Is it primes? Is it seconds? Like, is it, utility versus credit card? There's all these factors. Is it healthcare? We know our models will tell us what we should get based on what you do. Like, are you currently texting? Are you currently emailing? Like, you tell us that, we tell you, boom. So I'm not surprised by that number at all because, but I think it's part of the strategy. The strategy is, am I going to try to save money in the long term, or am I ready to go? And you could always do
Yeah.
combos, right? Like you could get a product now and just build internally, um, and see if it's
Stopgap
working.
the
Yeah.
current problem and build
Yeah.
something out that you want to build out. But I go back to the question of why, because now I got these maintenance issues. Now I got this upfront investment that I got to make, not only to roll somebody in,
Yeah.
but when we're measuring ROI, right? There's only three things that matter in a business: the cash flow, the timing of the cash flow, and the risk associated with that cash flow. So if I'm
Right.
looking at the ROI of me investing in AI technology, the timeline in which I'm going to start to see the cash flow based on that investment and the risk associated with that investment are two of the main things that I'm looking at. Am I going to make more money? When am I going to make more money? And how much risk am I taking on to make more money? Right? I
Right.
can break down any business into those three areas.
No, absolutely agree. I do think, I think a lot of companies were caught off guard, Adam, and maybe that's driving some of these numbers, that they were going to have this expense because we budget for the year and we're like, this is the budget, got to stick to the budget, can't move off the budget. And then they realize, okay, Copilot's not doing it for me. I got to go buy a Claude. So, I have Copilot licenses for everybody, and now I've got, I have my companies on, is now on, Claude because they're bigger into the coding or whatever. So you have some of those factors. I do think some of the things that we talked about earlier, the ability to start, implement, execute, and continue to do is one of those big issues. So, and with the technology changing so quickly, if we think about what the beginning of 2025 was like from an LLM perspective and where we are now, it is significantly different. And so you may have started building something, January 1st, got to June when 5.0 came out and said, oh crap, now you're starting over again, right? Because it's a different model. So you have all those factors that go into it. I to what Mike talked about is, if you want to try something because you don't know what's going to work. Let's say you were doing, warehouse auto deficiency paper, So, I mean, it's been through three agencies and it's just sitting at yours now. There's a bunch of that still, you can still work that, but maybe that's not right for voice AI. But if it is, and you want to test it, then go find a company and go test it. Don't build it, don't, because if now you've done all that investment and it's not working for you. And I think so many companies just said, hey, we can get rid of all of our employees, and then we're just going to put in, new word, angetic AI to be able to do that. And said, no, if your business is based upon relationships, if you remove relationships, there goes your business, So
Yeah,
you can
I
build,
think you're
you
there.
can build a,
That's a really good
yeah,
point,
go ahead.
Tim. Like, we have agentic AI, and people are like I walked into a call center, and people are like, "Hey, you guys are the guys with the virtual agent. Am I going to lose my job?" Right? And I'm like,
Right.
"No, you're just your job is going to get harder because all the easy calls are going to be handled by agentic." And I'm like, hopefully they'll give you another break. I'm going to tell them to do that, but to me, it's do more with the same, not do more with less. Like, I think if you map this out right, you're going to handle more of your inventory, and there's always going to be those.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to discover more edge cases of, wait a minute, I paid this. Like, especially if you're in medical, right? Like, that's you're going to need people to do that. You're going to need people for the old lady who says, I won't take my cancer medication. I'll send you the $200, and you're going to get your client on the New York Times, right? Like, so you have to. There will always
Right.
be people. I've heard predictions where all call centers will be agentic AI in 5 years. I don't believe that. I think
Not for a second.
where I
Yeah.
what I tell people, your career people are going to be there. Your people that are hired just for the 2 months of the training paycheck and are quitting immediately after training's done, you're not going to have to go through that mess anymore, right?
Which is one of our biggest expense lines.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Very, very true. I do think
Nobody
I
hires
think there's this opportunity.
30. Yeah, and gets 30, right? Like they get 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you always have to overhire. But the AI can help you scale, like we talked about earlier. I do think this. I think there's this great opportunity to use AI to help humans be better. Right. So if the AI is listening to the call, it can say, "You didn't say the mini Miranda." It could pop that up, and all of a sudden you could say, "Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I was supposed to tell you this." Blah blah blah. Or if it's talking about like a medical situation that's very significant. It's hard to read everything that happened in the notes, and the AI could be whispering that into your ear or popping it up on a screen. So you just made these humans even better. So just imagine that, and that could be very, very competitive, which gets you the market share that you talked about earlier. So there's all of these things that could be done. We don't have to just run to, yeah, we have a company and I come in every morning and I push one button and we make 10 million bucks. That's not how this piece
Well,
is
Tim, you and I
gonna
talked
work.
about on one of the AI hubs about being able to build an entire business, right? And the AI built business, driven business. And I'm not saying that that's
AI
not a
first.
possibility, but I don't think that that's going to be the reality for the debt collection industry because we exist
Exactly.
for the ability to have that touch point, to deploy the compassion, and to be able to have those more difficult conversations. I think the more that we can deploy tools to enable us to reach more of those people and to bring them into the fold and to provide the self-service that they're ultimately looking for, right? The better off we're all going to be in the long term. But gentlemen, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights. I could literally talk about this all day with you guys. I could spend my entire day
Yeah.
doing this.
Agreed.
We know that.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
that's
Good to
generally
see
what
you
we
again,
do,
man.
right? So for those of you that are watching live or those of you that are watching the replay, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Tim, Mike, or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And I'm willing to bet I can get these gentlemen back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, gentlemen, I really do appreciate your insights.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Mike.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. We appreciate your time and attention. We'll see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Tim.